Here we go. My name's Todd.
And this is Cathy.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen Parenting Radio. This is episode number 804. Why listen to Zen Parenting Radio? Because you'll feel outstanding. And always remember our motto, which is the best predictor of a child's well-being is a parent's self-understanding. The title of today's show is going to be The End of Discussion. And that's the end
of the discussion. So now we're done.
Will you tease it? Because then I do have a few kind of small things I want to.
Well, I think I'll start it this way. Like if you are somebody who is you struggle to watch the news because you feel like everyone's just yelling at each other, which I don't watch the news at all because I can't deal with those kind of like cross table discussions. What's that called? Like when they're like in sports and stuff and in news when people are like, they're all sitting at a table and they just yell at each other. What's that called?
Unhealthy debates?
I guess. I feel like there's a name for it. It's like a type of, but regardless, it's very hard for me to listen. And part of the reason is because what people use in those discussions are what are called thought-terminating cliches. A thought-terminating cliche, we're going to talk about that throughout the show, like so you have a better understanding of what it is. But it's not just used on the news. It's used when you're in discussion with someone. It's used when you're trying to make points and the other person is making their points. And basically what it is a sentence that someone says that completely stops the ability to continue talking. What I mean by that is saying something like, I'll just do a really basic one, is like, let's agree to disagree. So if I said that to you, Todd, that's what? If I'm like, okay, let's just agree to disagree.
That's the end of the discussion.
That's the end of the discussion.
Yeah, we're not going to get any further if we keep talking.
Correct. And what we're going to really kind of parse out in this conversation is how it can be very nuanced, because there are times that a discussion may need to come to a close. But the majority of time, there's a lot more insidious thought-terminating cliches that are meant to kind of wrap you up and get you overwhelmed. And oftentimes they're used to mess with your brain. So these, this is like a cult tactic. It's a way of getting people to not think for themselves. It's getting people to not be critical thinkers. And so I wrote a Substack last week about this, and I used a lot of examples. So Todd and I wanted to kind of talk through it again, using the examples and talk through what we can do differently and how we can have conversations that don't end up like big fights on the news.
There we go. But first, I want to say that I'm about to play a video of a man named Ricky Pearsall.
Okay.
And this is, Ricky is a member of the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
And he was shot in the chest the summer before, and he missed a bunch of games because he got shot.
Wow.
And the story is about forgiveness.
Okay.
And it's a really sweet little thing, but I just wanted to say that we have a partner this week.
Okay.
And so this little video clip is presented by David Serrano.
Okay.
You know who David Serrano is?
He's our financial management guy.
Personal financial advisor, David Serrano. One-on-one financial advice, helping figure out the balance between saving for retirement versus saving for college tuitions, how you should play the market, and so on and so forth. He's smart. He's trustworthy. He's David Serrano.
Is that his new tagline?
I made that up. His phone number is 815-370-3780. Cathy and I trust him wholeheartedly with all of our finances, and you should too. So anyways, I'm just going to play a clip. So this guy named Ricky is a 49er, and this is 60 seconds when a newspaper reporter asked him about this man who shot him.
Okay.
I thought about this one. Are you ever curious about what caused him to?
Yeah, I'm curious, but sometimes you just don't got answers for that. You know what I mean? For me, I don't got answers. I don't know where he's came from, what environment he grew up in,
Right.
And that goes back I was just about to talk about the entire opinions about the whole situation. For me, it's like, I don't know, how he grew up. So I can't judge him as a man just based off of one action that he made. Is as violent as a crime it was, God forbid him doing that to somebody else. I don't ever want that to happen. So, whatever has to go into that, But for me, just being able to forgive him, at the end of the day, like I have to be able to forgive him or have that weight off my chest. You know what I mean? And at some point, I do want to talk to the kid and make sure that if I can create an impact on him in any way, I think that would be really big. And I think I'd be definitely open to doing that for sure.
About that.
That's basically the opposite of what we're talking about today, which is very interesting.
Right.
I like the juxtaposition because basically he's saying, I want to keep this an open dialogue. He literally uses, I want to get it off my chest. And didn't you say he got shot in
I
the
believe
chest?
he got shot in the chest. Yeah.
So that's really, I mean, that's for his own mental health. That's where he's got to be.
Yeah. No. And I just listened to 60 Minutes, which is kind of just a depressing 20 minutes of news. And I just needed to counterbalance that with somebody who looks at the world through a different lens than some of the things that are going on in this world.
Well,
right now.
and that's the thing that's so crazy to me is that I hear what he says, and again, not everybody would speak like he does and be willing to forgive, but I think more of us we understand that kindness is important and compassion is important, and aren't we taught that? Like, doesn't everyone go through school and learn that? And again, I'm not saying it's always, it's not the only thing they learn. There are people who are treated poorly, and there's adults who take advantage of kids. I'm very aware of the many different ways we get formed and shaped. But sometimes when I look at the news and I look at what people are choosing to do right now, if it be with this administration, or it's so cruel.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to believe that people are like, yay. Like, how do you cheer for something that is so, it's harmful, and it feels not thought out, and it feels it's just rough. I don't listen to 60 Minutes because, like I said,
I would advise against it.
It was a bad one.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff happening in the government right now, and it's just very demoralizing.
Yeah.
Frustrating. I just texted your sister actually because we're going back and forth on some other stuff, and I'm just like, if you want to get depressed, go listen to 60 Minutes because I listen to it. I don't watch it. But anyways, before we get to the end of discussion,
Yes.
You and I are going to be at Zibby's tomorrow, sweetie.
Yeah, so we're going to be at Zibby's Bookshop tomorrow in Santa Monica, California. So if you are somebody who's listening to us or have listened to us for a long time and you live in California, we're going to be there talking about restoring our girls at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. And
say the date just so people listening after don't show up.
What's today?
Today's the 25th.
So the 26th.
Yeah.
So February 26th, it's a Wednesday, 9 a.m. in California, Santa Monica, Zibby's Bookshop. So we will be there. What's this? Oh, we're going to California. Correct. Just a brief stopover.
Sweetie, what album is this off of?
I don't know what album this is off.
I believe it's Led Zeppelin 4.
Okay. Yeah, I would have had to just
which has
guess.
Black Dog and Stairway and Going to California and many other wonderful songs.
So probably the most beloved, huh?
California with an aching. Sweetie, I hope you don't have an aching in your heart when you're going to California with me.
I think that it'll obviously be the first time going to California since the fires.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot we're going to see.
Yeah.
But anyway, so please come. And Todd, will you put it in the show notes?
Sure.
So Todd will put a link in the show notes so you can click on it and see.
And so we have this thing called Team Zen. It's a monthly subscription. You pay whatever it is, $20 a month. You get access to Cathy and I. We do a Zoom thing twice a month.
Zoom thing means we do a Q&A.
A Zoom meeting. You get support, whatever. And you also do a women's group, and that's March 5th. If you're interested in joining Team Zen, go ahead and click on the show notes below.
Yeah, I love talking to the women. We talk once a month. So if you need women community,
this is the way to get it.
This is a way to get it because we build each other up and make sure that we're hearing each other. So,
as opposed to the women in the White Lotus last night.
Yes. Well, I mean, let's just say I know that that's going to go bad.
So we listened to the second episode of the third season of White Lotus. We watched. And just a lot of, I don't know, backstabbing is overreaching.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can't say anything yet. I was feeding you some information, like I said in the very first episode, these women do not like each other. Mm-hmm. Because I can tell by the way that women talk to each other if they're being kind of standoffish and making sure that they make their points or if they're actually hearing each other and caring about each other. And they were just too adamant about what good friends they were.
Yeah.
There was a way too much like, we've been best friends forever.
You know what that
So-
reminded me of?
what?
It reminded me of this sketch on SNL. I'm just going to play a little clip of it.
Documentaries, and they don't even give me a free membership.
These are the two that pretended to be Lorne Michaels' friends.
Oh, yeah.
Fred Armisen and what is it?
Vanessa Bayer.
Yeah. And they talk about, certain things and then they whisper the honest, truthful.
So basically, they're like, we're Lorne Michaels' best friend
Yeah.
because they did the SNL 50th, anniversary. And they're like, oh, yeah, we love him. He's our best friend.
And then when they whisper,
Yeah. And then they're like,
Guys, I can barely hear you, but it sounds like you have a deeply dysfunctional relationship with him.
No.
No.
It's kind of like how you feel about Colin and Che.
Oh, come on. No, I love Colin and Che. They're the best. I will say, like, I do feel like their chemistry is like, you guys.
so that's a little bit what the ladies are like on on White Lotus, but they are not the worst characters. I mean, they are at least doing their, I'm sure things are going to get heavy, but I would say the men that we're being introduced to are not quite as stand-up-ish either.
Everybody's awful on that show, except for like two characters. But I will say, the whole idea of like women talking bad about each other, it's not a women thing. It's a human being thing. It's
Thank
not,
you.
women do not dominate saying one thing and then saying something else to somebody else about that person, gossip, whatever it is. It's not a woman thing.
No,
Guys are as bad as the girls.
And they may do it in a different way.
Yeah, right.
They may say different things or but I would not want to contribute to the stereotype that women are any worse at that because
I remember my stepdad, Rich Ghilarducci, rest in peace. He's been gone 21 years, but he said his friends are the worst.
Right.
They're the worst.
They just talk about people.
They just talk about, judging and
I think what might be the difference is what we're being judged about. You know what I mean? Like just taking the women on the White Lotus, they're talking about their appearance or what plastic surgery they've had or what kind of money they have. And one of their friends, they're just, this is a thing too. It's 3 women.
Yeah.
Which creates a triangulation, right? So it's like, if you don't know how to manage that, if you are not on each other's sides and have each other's backs, it can really bite you. So as soon as one person goes to bed, the other 2 kind of talk shit about the other person. And then there's a lot of you're so pretty. And then they don't comment on the third.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you work so hard.
Right.
It's their commentary. So lots of relationship stuff on the White Lotus. And, I got to say, one thing that I remembered is that the White Lotus doesn't give us a lot of justice at the end.
No.
So we kind of have to walk through the story of people. And Mike White, who does the show, he's not someone who's oh, and then everybody gets their due justice. It doesn't work that way.
No, it's not tied up in a nice bow at the end.
Sometimes there's a character or two, but no.
Before we get in the end, can I just give you a little more taste of Fred and the other lady?
I guess so.
Okay.
Okay. And then he starts pointing at paintings and saying oh, this is from Steve, this is from Paul, this is from Mick.
Yeah, and it's does he mean Mick Jagger?
Just say it. Just say it.
I'm sorry, you guys have to speak up.
I just think that those two are hilarious. Sorry.
It was a good bit.
It was good. You got to watch the whole thing. End of discussion, sweetie.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about let's just talk about thought-terminating cliches first, because I wrote a Substack last week about how okay, let me say this first. I'm going to back up. I wrote a proposal, I've talked about this before, about cults and high control groups, and back it up. Cults, high control groups, and abusive relationships. I wrote a full proposal, 40 pages.
You worked hard on that.
I worked hard, went away for the weekend, figured it out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You went away for the weekend.
And it got rejected because there was this is not what your area of expertise is, even though I kind of feel like it is these days, but it's not to the big world, because I didn't go to school for criminology or something. So what I did do, though, when I wrote Restoring Your Girls, which is much more about my expertise and what I do every day, is I made sure that I used what I learned about or researched or experienced in my, cult high control group proposal and put it into restoring our girls.
Is it under the encourage critical thinking
Correct.
part of it?
And I wrote a whole thing about encouraging critical thinking and why it's so important and red flags and talking to kids about high control groups and how you talk to them and how you listen to them to encourage critical thinking.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go in deep in the book about thought-terminating cliches, but I wanted to talk about that in Substack because it can be a red flag, an indicator that you are having conversation with somebody who wants to either control the conversation, stop the conversation, or like completely keep you from sharing or thinking for yourself.
So last week, before we press record on our Zen Talk,
Zen Talk is our parenting community.
You and I were having a discussion. I don't remember what it was about, which I think is probably a good thing. But I said,
"Oh, I know.
Pretend I never said. Forget I said anything."
Yes, yeah,
right?
so I came downstairs and Todd said to me, I said I have a haircut and then I have to go see Jen. I had like a list of 3 things, and you go, "Oh, you're doing a lot of self-care," and it's somewhat of a benign statement, but it kind of struck me as like I was doing all these things to just like feel good. And I was like, no, these are things I have to do, like things I've scheduled, reasons that I'm doing these things, just like, and so right away, he put up his hands. He's like, forget I said anything.
We're about to press record. Like, I'm like, we don't have time to get into this. So
I agree.
Yeah.
We're doing it right now.
Right.
I mean, it's not that I wanted to have an argument. It's not me, but it's not me trying to be like, you're wrong and let me tell you why. But the way that it came off to me sounded like flippant. Like, oh, mom's going to have a self-care day. And that's not what it was at all. Now, that's not what you meant.
Right.
We've talked this through since. But right when I pushed back and said, well, that's not exactly what it is. You said, forget I said anything.
Well, yeah. And it's not as much about, my comment about it's a self-care day. It's more about what I said after that, which is forget
Correct.
I said anything, which
Correct.
lines up with what it is that we're talking
It's a
about today.
thought-terminating cliche because basically he's saying, I'm not going to hear you. I'm not, whatever you're about to say, I'm not interested. And you're basically just the way that, when someone puts up their hands, they're like, I'm done with you.
Bottom line is I picked the wrong time to say that thing because you were just finishing up writing that blog or in the middle of it.
I was in the middle of it. And I go, wow, you just gave me a thought-terminating cliche.
And I'm like, that's a lot of syllables and I don't know what you just said.
Because how do I continue talking? And again, we're over this, by the way. There's not a lot of emotion around this. How do I continue saying what I need to say when he says, forget I said anything? Yeah. So basically what he's done is said, that's the end of the discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to listen, just like you're entitled to your opinion or, let's agree to disagree. Yeah. These are, so basically something that I wrote is a thought-terminating cliche and critical thinking exist on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Say that one more time.
Well, I'm not even done with what I'm saying.
Okay.
Thought-terminating cliches and critical thinking are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, okay.
One shuts down thought while the other encourages curiosity.
Yeah.
Okay. So a thought-terminating cliche, the whole idea of it, the whole point of it is to stop the conversation or to stop having you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more like thought terminating discussion is I'm closed.
I'm done. Yeah.
Store is closed. And then the opposite critical thinking is I'm open.
I'm open.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean let's have a 2-hour long conversation. Like that's the thing is we get too binary about either we're going to talk about this for hours and hours or I'm going to shut this down right now. There's all these places in the middle. If we can talk about this for 5 minutes and pick it up later, we can talk about it for 2 minutes and be done and both feel heard. We can, have a discussion that's ongoing because it's hard to solve it in one, iteration of the conversation. The point is recognizing, like as Todd and I talk about these thought terminating cliches, I want you to see yourself, number one, because we all use them. You know what I mean? This is not like, oh, only cults use these. Everybody uses them. This is what you're seeing on TV when people yell and say, well, that means you want to kill babies. So that is a way of stopping the conversation because how do you say anything after that lines up with that comment? Because you sound no matter what you say, you're like, oh, are you avoiding that? Are you not saying, so the whole goal of that is to keep people from thinking critically.
What's interesting is I'm just going to read, because you have like 10 examples in your Substack. And if you don't subscribe to Cathy's Substack, you're missing out, because she works really hard on that. And it's really good stuff.
Thank you.
The statements themselves can be seen through the lens of, and maybe you've already said this, but not that bad of a thing. Like there's, if you're like really highly energized with somebody that you debate, whether it's Cubs versus Sox, let's say, and you're just not getting anywhere, agree to disagree could be a productive thing to say in a conversation.
It could be.
Or it could be the worst thing in the world to say in a discussion. So it's a nuance of it.
It is very nuanced, and I agree with that. And that's why, like the beginning of my Substack, I give the ones that are most common and not so harmful. Yeah. But they're still so. If someone was discussing Cubs and Sox, have they been like discussing this their whole lives, where they've been like, this is, this stadium is better and this coach is better and this history is better. And they have all that information and they're like, okay, let's just agree to disagree, because all the information is on the table, right? Really, they're just having an old fight. Yeah. That's a very different thing. But if we're like coming to somebody with an opinion or something that we are experiencing for the first time or something that we really need to discuss, like our kid comes home and says, you know what, I have been doing basketball and I decided I don't want to do, a winter sport or whatever it may be. And we're like, well, sorry, let's just agree to disagree on this one because you're going to keep going. Yeah. There's no discussion about why, where that came up, what they might be doing in place of it, if they need rest, if mental health is an issue. Like that is just shutting down. That's basically, I'm going to win and you're going to lose.
Yeah, I wish I had a sound effect like, eh. Like there's like, I think of like a buzzer in a basketball game. Like when you hear that sound, everything's off the table. We're done. We're done. Yeah.
And this, again, I'm going to keep bringing it back to the news and things we watch on TV because that's very relevant, because we're like, why am I feeling so uncomfortable here? Why is this conversation not going anywhere? It's because everyone's using thought-terminating cliches. Yeah. Nobody is really curious. Everybody is trying to get everyone else to think like they do and to make them feel dumb about the way they think. Yeah. So that, like I said, this is used in, high level in organizations. This is used in cults. This is used in high control groups. This is used in religious groups. And again, a lot of these are overlapping things, but it's a way of basically saying to you, I know more than you, or don't quit talking to me because I'm not interested. So, just as an example, I don't know if I'll get through all of these, but let's agree to disagree. Something we can say back. If it's not about Cubs and Sox or something not that big of a deal, is I totally respect that. I'd like to know more about what you think and if you're up for it. Yeah. So you don't have to accommodate that thought-terminating cliche. Now, you may say, I get that. I know we disagree, but I'd still like to continue this conversation. They may say no, it may not happen. You have to know when to walk away. Yeah. In no way am I saying in this Substack, keep pushing till you get your needs met. What I'm saying is there are things we can say to keep that from going in the direction where we feel like we have no voice. It's very similar to you're entitled to your opinion.
Hold on. I want to put, when you say one of the thought-terminating cliches, I'm trying to find a basketball buzzer.
Okay, let's hear the buzzers. Oh, that's a good one.
You like that one? We'll just go with that one. So whenever you say one of those, I'm just going to play that sound.
Okay. So the next one that we'll talk about is you're entitled to your opinion. Which it is nuanced, because there can be times when saying that, if it's not said with a snarky tone, again, remember, everything is about tone. It might sound open-minded, but really what you're doing is, instead of listening to somebody else's ideas, it's an easy way out, right?
What it is, it's not the content, because we all are entitled to our opinion. There's 100% truth in that. And the context is, I'm closing you off.
Correct.
We're done.
And one of the most important parts of this one, or at least what I see the most with you're entitled to your opinion, is it gives that person the ability to not hear anything new. Mm-hmm. Because if they hear something new, if they say, oh, you're entitled to your opinion, I'll keep my own, it could cause cognitive dissonance, which is that when new information challenges your beliefs and you're like not quite sure how to rest in your beliefs when you're hearing new information.
What's an easier way of saying cognitive dissonance? Because it seems very fancy.
Well, I just
I
explained
know,
it
but
again.
you said it in a phrase. Is there like a 2-word thing of what cognitive dissonance means?
Cognitive dissonance is when you're holding two contradictory beliefs.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right.
Like that. And some people, I think that wisdom is the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Is to handle the fact that not everything is clean cut, black and white, that there is a spectrum.
Right.
You know, that is wisdom to me. But to some people, that's discomfort and lack of certainty. And most people are very uncomfortable with lack of certainty.
Yeah.
And so
scares us.
It scares them. So they're kind of like, you're entitled to your opinion. And so something we could say back is, well, I appreciate that. I'd love to understand more about your perspective too, to keep the conversation going if you so choose.
Yeah.
If you're done, walk away. Okay. So Todd, one of my favorites. Do you have your buzzer ready?
I am going to have it ready right now.
Okay. So this one is really, it's fairly recent. I've heard it a lot in the past 5 years. And it's when you start to tell someone something new or ask a question and they say, do your research.
Do your research.
Do your research is such a annoying comment because basically it's a passive aggressive way to stop the conversation when someone doesn't agree or when someone doesn't share the same beliefs. And instead of offering something like that someone could really like learn from, you're basically putting all the onus on the other person.
So what do you say instead of do your research?
The thing that I wrote, because I had to think really deeply about these, like, what do you say back that is real? Because I get on your case all the time about, would someone really say that?
Oh, yeah, sweetie.
I'm always on your case.
Well, yeah, like, I don't know. You just care more about the
Authenticity.
words and the precision of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're more about the trees and I'm about the forest.
I get it.
Who cares?
And well, we have to care because you like to talk in not all the time. I'm going to, make sure I say this without.
There are times when
there are times when you speak things that are not genuine ways that people would talk. So when you're offering like a thing like, just say how, and it's funny, in Men Living, you may talk like that. Like it's just in regular conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really say to somebody, hey, stop? I want you to check out in your body where you're feeling that.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's not how we talk to people. In coaching, you do.
Sure.
But it's like not conversational. And so I like to, when I'm offering something to people, be really genuine. Like, how could you say this to your kid in a real way? Or how could you say this to your partner in a real way? Because as soon as you start to pull out, and you're not using jargon as, really.
Yeah,
but,
where are you feeling that in your body is not jargon, but it's certainly not how most of us talk to each other.
No. And it would turn people off.
So and I know we're totally off track here, but what is a different way of saying, because if you say if I'm trying to like tap into body intelligence, which I am, which I'm not that good at, and most of the guys that I work with are not that good at because that gets beat out of us when we're 4 years old. What's one or two other ways of saying, where do you feel that in your body?
Well, again, I think I want to differentiate because in a conversation, when you're coaching someone, you can just say it like that.
Right. But let's say you and you're having sadness.
Okay. So I would probably say something like, really what I would say in that conversation is, when I feel this way, my chest hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, when you feel grief, do you feel it in your chest too, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah.
Because that's more, it's not so much.
It's an easier on-ramp.
It is. And that's, I think, how people really talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I think when people get annoyed at other people, especially if you have friends who are therapists or wellness practitioners, you don't want them talking to you in their like therapist speak.
Yeah,
You
right.
want to have conversation speak.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing is, like, you saying certain things isn't bad per se. It's just, when are we saying them and to who? And if someone says, if someone is deflecting and they're saying, do your research, and they're over, that's thought-terminating cliche, end of discussion. We can say something like, I am always open to learning. What information do you think I'm missing? So then
Hold on, I'm going to give you a clap for that one.
Okay.
That way people know when the good
thing,
the
comes
positive
in.
thing.
So it's just a way of like, if you're not ready to end that conversation, or if someone's saying, do your research, to be like, okay, I just won.
Yeah.
it's such a thought terminating cliche, people.
Right.
So those of you who are listening who say to people, do your research, it's you got to give more than that.
Yeah.
You either have to be willing to listen to what this other person's experience is, or really share, this is something very specific I learned, and here's where I learned it. And hopefully it's not from conspiracy places.
And this is probably Captain Obvious, but like, okay, why is this important? Why did you decide to write a blog about this? Why are we doing a podcast on it? And I think the answer is, this is all about connecting with other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself using these thought terminating cliches, and then you're like, God, I just can't connect with my wife. Like, well, maybe that's one of the
Right.
reasons why it's happening.
Perfect. Yeah. Like there's always like kind of levels and levels and levels of why Todd and I talk about things, because it's not just one specific thing. I believe that one of our biggest problems now, and has been for years, is our inability to hear each other, right? And not in a way where we let people dump a bunch of toxic crap on us. Like there's nuance in this too. Like if someone is coming after me and, it's just yelling and fear and anger, I don't believe I need to be in that conversation. But if I am having a conversation with someone who does have information, I want to, A, not use thought terminating cliches myself, and B, recognize when they are doing that, because then maybe trying to pivot in a different way, because sometimes they're used in families where people don't even realize what they're doing. It's just things they say. It's cultural, like there's just ways that people talk and they don't even realize, to your point, that you're stopping the discussion by what you just said.
And the reason I stopped it last week is because I was probably a mixture of scared and angry.
Well, you were sick. You weren't feeling very
that's right. I
good.
didn't feel well either.
And you just didn't want to deal with it in that moment. And that is fair. Like there is nothing, like I said, it's not like I was angry at that. It's just what that does. So from your perspective, you're like, I'm done. I'm sick. I don't want to deal with this. But for someone like me, who the thing that challenges me the most is when I don't feel like I'm heard. It feels like it's a little bit of a slap on the wrist to me.
Yeah.
Like quit doing your woman thing.
Yeah.
And I'm making that up. You did not say that. That's just what it triggers inside of me.
Well, and I don't know if this would have landed better, but I said, you know what, honey, I got no energy, and
I chose my words poorly.
yeah, that wasn't cool. And can we forget I said that? And that's probably a little bit better than what I said.
Well, and that's the thing, is you don't have to be like, this
give me a
gets
do-over.
so difficult because, it's not you're wrong for saying self-care. What an awful thing. And you should have known. It's more like, okay, I'm hearing that the words I just chose hit you in some way. So I'm going to try different words, because all I'm really trying to do is say, oh, you're going to do these things.
Right. And to do that would take work from me that I was unwilling to do in that moment.
Right.
So anyways.
Well, and this is the discussion, we've been talking a lot since the conference about, and in my book, I talk a lot about adapting. And one of the things that I believe and that I've experienced in my work as a therapist is that women are very astute at adapting. Again, it's not a general blanket rule for all women. It's just because we've been forced to adapt in so many situations, if it be what we wear, what we look like, how we experience the workforce, what kind of, our shifts in parenting, our adapting has been expected for decades and decades and decades. I think one of the challenges that is facing men right now, and I'm obviously talking to Todd and a lot of the men who are in Men Living and other people that we know, is this adapting issue, is that as culture changes, there is a belief that they shouldn't have to change. And there's a pushback right now. We're seeing it from our government and from people who are in charge right now, saying, we don't have to do anything different. We're going to keep it status quo.
We like it back in the old days.
We want to go back. We want to make it great the way it was before, whatever that means. And we are not going to adapt. You are not going to tell me what I should call you. You're not going to tell me what words I can use. And there's an inability to adapt to a new culture. And so it instead, as in Duffy's books, he always talks about, it becomes men who are like, I don't know who to be in this culture. I don't know how to interact. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And while I have total compassion for that, especially, those of you who have sons or partners who are like, they're struggling. But this culturally is a moment of adapting for men, not adapting like in a way where they're not still important.
They don't lose
They
themselves.
don't lose themselves. They just start to learn new ways of compassion
We evolve.
and learn new types of work they can do and be open to understanding people a little differently and relating to why people get hurt by certain things.
Yeah.
And that is right now, if you're in a conversation with people about that, there's plenty of thought-terminating cliches like that's woke culture, as Jane Fonda said last night in her speech at the SAG Awards. Basically, being awake just means that you care about people. But somebody got a hold of that. Lots of people got a hold of that word, made it a negative thing.
Yeah.
As soon as they say, I'm not going to listen to you, that's just woke culture.
Yeah.
That is the end of the discussion.
It's a weapon.
It's a weapon.
They weaponize.
And so, these are kind of this conversation, this very small one that Todd and I had. It was bad timing, but good timing for what we were going to talk
Usually
about.
something good comes from it.
Yeah.
It's just in the moment. It blows chunks.
Exactly. Just in the moment. And I also can be like, I know that I'm triggered by those. I know that I don't like when I'm working or managing or creating or writing and someone's like, oh, you're going to go have a self-care day. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to take care of myself. I'm trying to do, like it, and that's not what you meant. It's what hit me.
Yeah. There's some ownership for both of us.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. So let's just move into when these happen in social control.
Let's do it.
For example, at a workplace, when somebody says something like, maybe you're upset about something or something's not working and someone says, just be a team player. Again, nuanced. There are times when we need to be team players. Like it's not, if you're on a basketball team, you can't be like, I'm going to just sit this one out. Like you may need to be out there on the basketball court, But there are also times when maybe you're bringing up something that really is, something that's not working well or the numbers are wrong.
Sometimes we need you not to be sometimes an organization, a family, a community. Being a team player means
going along with everything.
Yeah. And if everything is bad, then it's not good to be a team player.
Right. If you are going along with something that you feel like is going against your values, your morals, your character, that's an indicator. That's a flag for you to say that. And so something you can say when someone says be a team player is I'm totally ready to be a team player, but I think discussing these different ideas might be able to help.
I like sound effects.
I know, me too. They make me laugh. Okay, so another one that happens when it comes to social control, maybe in the workplace, or maybe this happens with partners and with kids, is when you're sharing all these ideas and someone says, you're overthinking it. So overthinking it, yes, I am an external processor. I talk a lot. And sometimes I know that it's like, okay, Todd will be like, go back to your first point. Like, I do know that. And then there are times that we have to understand why going through all these steps and stages of talking is important. Things are not black and white. They're not cut and dry. It's like, we got to consider this and we got to consider this. And so when someone says you're overthinking it, we can say, I need time to think this through to stay clear-headed. Like, I need time.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Keep going.
Premature clap. Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
I need time to think this through to stay clear-headed and find the best solution.
Well, and through this specific lens is really good. I'm thinking when you say that phrase, I think it's such a wonderful tool in a relationship because most of the time where we get in trouble, where I get in trouble, I'll use an I statement, is when I'm really triggered and reactive. And if I can use that phrase that you just said is like, hey, give me a minute. I need to like collect myself and think about what the next best thing I could say in this moment is. But most of us don't do that.
No.
We're just like, all right, let's get into it. Let's dig our heels in.
Right. And saying you're overthinking it is basically the indicator in that is you are neurotic. You are spiraling, you are processing too much, or you're making a big deal out of nothing. Like the underlying belief below you're overthinking it is stop thinking.
Yeah.
What is critical thinking?
Think.
It's thinking. It's thinking through. And it's okay to take your time. And yes, again, on opposite ends of the spectrum, there's extremes. There's some people who get so stuck in their thinking, they can't make a decision. And that's often anxiety based. And that's something they need support with. That's the inability to pull the trigger, right?
Yeah.
Like make the decision. But then when someone tells you, when you're trying to get a clear head and they tell you to stop getting a clear head, that's not great. Okay, so let's get into the gender norms, Todd.
Let's hear it.
So boys will be boys.
That's a bad
Like
one.
fades out into the distance.
Yeah.
So boys will be boys is so common, and people say it all the time in different ways, which basically means boys have bad behavior, but that's just boys. We don't, I mean, maybe some people say girls will be girls, but I don't hear that very much.
Not as common in this culture.
Not as common, because really girls have to accommodate and adapt and show up. So that's not, they don't get to just be girls. They have
Well,
to.
I have that wonderful T-shirt that says "Boys will be boys," and the "boys" is crossed out and says "good human beings."
Right. And when people say that, basically what they're doing is excusing bad behavior, right?
Can I tell a quick story?
Sure.
I remember me and a bunch of my neighborhood kids. This was like when I was 12 years old. We got in trouble. I don't know what it was for. But my mom did the thing where she knocked on all the parents' doors to tell them what happened, which is like the worst moment of most of our adolescent history.
Right.
And I remember there was it was Stevie Cooper, and his dad answered the door. Stevie Cooper got in trouble, and my mom's like, "Hey, just so you know, Stevie was part of this group that did this thing," and that's exactly what he said.
He said boys will be boys.
Yeah, and my mom, I don't know what my mom said, but I'm sure she just turned around and got back in the car.
And we have to understand how we've ingested that over our lifetime. And so sometimes many of us will be like, it's really not that big of a deal, because we've swallowed that for so long, that there is a belief that boys just can't help their bad behavior.
Well, and I feel the need to say, I can give you 15 different examples of how boys will be boys, and the opposite of that, of what the meaning of that statement is, which means just gentle, nurturing, beautiful human beings. And then I turn on the TV and it's MMA, and these two women are destroying each other.
Sure.
So I think it's important to out the opposites of these cliches or these thought-terminating.
Right. And that is important, because I do the same thing. Whenever I always say, but let's not, stereotype women, and you're saying, let's not stereotype men. But sometimes that conversation could be thought terminating right there. Where you'll say men, boys will be boys. Well, boys will be boys also means that they'll be human beings.
Yeah.
So that stops the conversation too, because then I have to pull out all the stopped around.
Then you got to bring out your research.
Then I have to bring out my research and be like, well, let's look at stats here.
Yeah.
What do we mostly mean when we say boys are boys? It's about the way they treat people. It's about the way they may destroy things. It's about the way they talk to people. And it's not about those things that you're just talking about. Sure. That would be nice.
Yeah.
But really what we'd say then is these boys are, we'd be more specific. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So you didn't do that, but we can find ourselves doing that because we want to make the other point.
Sure.
So, the thing we can say back is when someone says boys will be boys, we can say boys are learning just like everyone else, and they benefit from our guidance.
That's right.
There's no reason to not tell them that that's cruel,
right,
or you messed things up,
it's
or
an opportunity
clean
for
that up.
growth. It's an opportunity to teach, to nurture, to, I don't know.
And shouldn't the expectations of boys around humanity be the same?
Yeah.
Because right now it doesn't feel like they are.
No.
The expectations is just around money and power, and, like that. And again, generally.
Yep.
And we have to have different expectations.
Yeah.
And then another one, this kind of happens in partnership a lot. That's how things have always been. For example, if you're talking about something with equality, like who's going to stay home or who's going to work, or, who's going to clean the house, and then someone's like, well, that's just the way things have always been.
That's the way things have always been is probably one of the worst phrases in the English. And I'm sure I probably used it. Well, this is the way things are.
Yeah, the way things are.
But that's like, and I'm sure there's even movie quotes like, that is never a reason to ever do anything.
Right.
We should always be discerning.
Right.
I should always be questioning, is this the right thing or the wrong thing to do?
Well, and that's it right there, Todd, is that traditions are meaningful, but it's also important to ask if they're still serving us. Like things that we used to do or the way things have been, are they serving us now?
Yeah.
Is that working? Because like if someone said that in a marriage, like it's just the way things have always, the way things always have been, then it'd be like, but is that working for us?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're in a fight about this all the time. So anyway, so how about let's jump to the last couple. Everything happens for a reason. So again, this is a nuanced one because people who use that are trying to reassure. I don't think anyone's using that to be harmful.
Yeah.
But the problem is why it's a thought terminating cliche is the person who hears it then feels like they shouldn't question the unfairness or the injustice.
Right.
Right. So, it's difficult to have like an emotional response after someone says that because then you feel like you're disappointing people.
Well, and I feel like I would take that in a different direction. The whole idea of everything happens for a reason. For some reason, I think of something bad happening to me.
Yeah.
And a friend trying to comfort me saying, well, everything happens for a reason. Or like, what's the lesson that you could learn from this? And it bypasses the experience of feeling whatever it is that just happened.
Exactly.
So it's one of those spiritual bypass things for me.
It keeps them from having to hear how you're feeling about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's a spiritual bypass. It's like, let's just jump over how you feel and let's just assume that it happened because it was supposed to.
Yeah.
We may get to that point. Like if you go through the stages of grief, the last stage of grief that's been included with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's blessing, David Kessler came up with something called meaning. So after the 5 stages, the last one is meaning, and you find meaning for the grief that you went through.
Sure.
But you have to go through a bunch of stages.
Yeah. And what this does, it supersedes all of that stuff and gets the meaning out of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So now here's an interesting one, Todd. We can use thought terminating cliches against ourselves. Like we can say something like, I'm just not good at this, or that's just who I am. Right? So these are us reinforcing limiting beliefs before we've even tried something new.
Well, and when I hear that one, I think of like a 7-year-old who just had a crappy basketball practice and they just say, I'm not that good at this. And they're like crying because everybody else, or they didn't make the team. And, there's space for that. Like, yes, feel your feelings. And if you want to get better, then let's go to the gym more often or something like that.
Yeah. And it's kind of maybe in that moment, let them have that feeling.
Yeah.
Like you said, if it's a kid, see, it's almost like I can't use thought terminating cliches with kids.
Yeah.
Because kids have limited language, knowledge, wisdom, experience, abstract thinking. So
Yeah.
we're not going to blame them.
By the way, so do most grown-ups. But
Well,
just saying.
Yeah, but kids, I'm not going to say to a kid, you just used a thought terminating
Yeah, right.
cliche. I'm going to say, of course you feel that way.
So
I'm going
give me an adult version of I'm just not good at this.
I mean, as a therapist, I hear things like that all the time. Like I say it about cooking.
I say it about
I'll say I'm just not that good at it.
I say it about my body intelligence. Like I'm just not good at feeling my
Correct.
feelings.
Correct. You say it all the time.
Yeah.
Or people will say, sometimes people will be like, oh, I was rude to you. Well, that's just who I am. I just speak, I'm just say what I need to say. And instead of recognizing the impact it's having and the impact it's having on you, yourself, when you're being self-critical, and the impact you're having on other people by supposedly being the way you are.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of being a human being is evolving and adapting.
Yeah.
And if we're just digging our heels in, then, it's again. So again, something we can say back to, I'm just not that good at this, is you are still learning. That's how we get good,
For some reason, you just said that why are you the way you are? And it just reminded me of.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
That is just one of the best relationships, Michael and Toby.
Poor Toby. Toby's not happy. I know he's fine. He's a writer and he's good. He writes his own thing.
Yeah,
but-
and he's a character and he's not real, sweetie. So just so you know.
I know, it's just someone he's struggling. I think he's gone through a divorce. He's, got this picture of his kid in his office and he likes Pam and she obviously doesn't like him. And, he's the human resources person. It's very hard to be HR. Those of you who are listening who are in HR, I see you. I know, because you have to handle everybody's problems and it's hard. So anyway,
Can I just give you a little more Toby?
sure.
Sorry, so do we need to sign one or?
Let's just wait and see what happens.
It's when Jim and Pam are.
I'm saying they have a relationship.
Toby. Hold on, one more.
Hey, Kat.
He's rubbing Kevin's back.
Why?
Not good for the podcast. I think Toby just needs a hug.
That's what I mean is he's lonely. He needs people.
Sorry. Okay, last one.
So saying that's just who I am, we could say something like, yes, you've dealt with things like this way in the past, but that doesn't mean you can't try something new. You know? So, okay, so I'm just going to do two more. Okay, just to kind of keep this short. I wanted to use thought-terminating cliches that are used to silence women. Okay. And the most obvious ones are you're too emotional and calm down. Obviously, those are used because misogynistic type of thinking is that women are too irrational to have a conversation with. Okay. And so if we start by saying, just calm down, why are you crying? Or I can't believe you're doing this. Then right away, we're just stopping any kind of discussion or an ability for someone to share their feeling.
Well, and I'll add to this, the number of parents that have told me / us that their son is so easy and their daughters are so emotional. And I almost always say, like, if you're giving me a choice between two people, one who lets their emotions out and one who pushes them down, give me the one that lets them out.
Yeah.
I can work with that.
Well, in the long run, like anything else, it's healthier. Not only is there more of ability to connect and have an intimate relationship with your kid, intimate meaning like really talking about what's bothering them. So you get closer to them, you know them better, they trust you more. Those of you who have children who really don't tell you anything and you're like, well, they're easy because they have no problems. You have to remember human beings, everybody's struggling with things. So it's like, and that doesn't mean for those of you listening who are like, oh, my son is 14 and they're not telling me enough. It goes in phases.
Yeah,
it's not going to be like they're going to tell you everything all the time. But you've got to remember, are you responding with thought-terminating cliches? Like, oh boy, you need to calm down first, because right away they're going to get defensive and shut down.
This is a bit of a sidebar, but I got a Marco Polo from a man in my life who has 3 daughters, and he's struggling because I think his daughters are like 9 and 11. 2 of his daughters are that, and he's having a hard time navigating their fierce independence and rebellion and all that. One is I normalized it, but then secondly is like, I want daughters that are rebellious. I want daughters that are independent.
Right.
Now, as a dad, as a father of 3 daughters, there is an egoic or short-term thinking part of me that when my kids are being rebellious, I just want them to fall in line, like go to bed. Compliance, thank you. But everywhere else in the world, I want them to be rebellious, and you can't have one without the other.
Well, and maybe the way you have to think about this as a parent is that you want to support their spiritedness and you want to support their questioning, and try not to make it about them against you.
Yeah.
Try to be someone who sees it and honors it. And you're like, oh, I see you. I see you. I love that, that spirit in you. You can also say, we still need to go to bed at a certain time.
Right.
I totally understand that we're going to talk about this, but then we eventually have to go to bed. If you support them going into the world that way and not make it about, hey, you're either spirited or you comply.
Yeah.
Those are hitting your kid against you.
Yeah.
You want, and it's the same thing in partnership. Like, it's easier to talk about this. Like, when there is a fight or an argument, it's the two of you against that.
Yeah.
It's not you two against each other.
Be in the same boat.
Yeah. You two are trying to solve that together.
Be on the same team.
And that's what you can do with your kids too, is when they're coming to you and they're like, and I don't like this and I don't like this. Be like, oh, I get it.
Well, maybe like the idea of like, it's time to go to bed. You can't stay up till midnight on a school night. Like, instead of me against you, it's like us and you having a better school day tomorrow.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And like you were just trying to give an example really quickly, but even saying to a kid, go to bed, it's a school night, right away, they're going to get pushback versus, I can't wait to get in bed because tomorrow's such a long day. I'm going to go lay down. Like, make going to bed something enjoyable.
Yeah.
Make something to bed something that or on nights when you're like, it's hard for me to go to bed sometimes, but I know I need to, join them in that experience. And rather than, and again, with little kids, sometimes it has to be more cut and dry.
Yeah.
But as you said, 9 and 11, which is when their brains are different.
Yeah.
They do have the abstract thinking. They are trying to think for themselves.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to jump to parenting.
Okay.
Thought-terminating cliches we use in parenting. And Todd, I'm going to give you 3 doozies. Are you ready?
Yep.
Because I said so. Life's not fair. I'm going to give you 4. You're too young to understand. You'll understand when you're older. Okay.
All pretty bad.
All pretty bad because it stops the conversation. That's why we're being very repetitive here, but people will be like, well, it's not that big of a deal. But if you say, because I said so, you are teaching them. It's a classic response, but it's like a way you think you're reinforcing boundaries, but really what you're doing is you're teaching obedience and telling them not to question anything. Yeah. Okay. Life's not fair. It can sound like a practical thing to say, but it actually feels scary. And it invalidates their feelings and suggests that nothing can be done or should be done to change that.
Yeah, I got some baggage with that one, and I'm sure I've shared it on this podcast. My Aunt Ruth loved her, died, whatever, 40 years ago. I don't know. I always remember her saying, because I was probably, because, she was born into a much different world than I was.
Correct.
She was probably born in 1925. No food on the table, scrapping for meals. And she said, nobody ever said life was going to be fair. And that impacted me. And I don't use it with, I have used it with my kids, I'm sure, but I don't like use it as a tool whenever they're complaining about something. But that one, and I don't even know if she was using it as a thought-terminating cliche. I think she was more like, hey,
a teaching thing.
So life sometimes sucks. And sometimes when I'm like feeling sorry for myself, I'm like, you know what? Sometimes it's not fair. There's plenty of things going on in the world right now that seem really unfair.
Well, and that makes this one a really nuanced one, right? Because of course life's not fair in many ways. But when children, this in a parenting conversation, it's scary to them.
Sure.
And when you're just like, life's not fair, that makes everything feel kind of wobbly and like, well, if it's not fair, what grounds me? And something we might say instead is, I know this feels unfair.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be upset. How can I support you right now? Like, you're not going to say to them, no, life is fair and everyone gets their karmic, comeuppance. That's not true. That's what we were just saying about White Lotus. That's why it's such an interesting show. But you can help them through the feelings of the unfairness, because we were just at a tournament this weekend, and there are some kids who did a really good job and who are really excellent at what they do. And because of judging or because of the moment or because of the other kids in their group or whatever it may be, they don't rise to the level that was expected. It isn't fair because they are still excellent. And there is only, it's kind of like an Academy Award, only one person could win it, but you can't tell me they're the best actor in all the world.
Yeah,
it isn't fair per se, but we can say this feels unfair, and let's talk through our feelings about it, because it's again very nuanced.
Can we brag about our daughter right now or no?
Sure.
Our daughter, Skylar, is a junior, and she qualified for the state finals
in speech.
And she does an event called Impromptu, which means they give her a quote, and she's got 2 minutes to come up with a 5-minute speech.
Correct.
She began speech last year as a sophomore, and as a junior, she qualified for state. Not only did she just qualify for state, sweetie, how did she do?
She's second place in the state of Illinois. Yeah.
And I'm still buzzing.
Yeah, she's the runner-up. And here's the thing. This is why it's important, because this conversation we even had with Skylar, because some of her best friends or other people that she's been learning from did not place in state. And the conversation is not now you're better than everybody else. This is a competition.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that have to be in place. The group that you're in.
Oh, she did well, and you have to be lucky.
You do. And she has this, so you have to have the skill, first of all, which she has, and a lot of those other kids do too. And then it's like who you're going against, how you feel that day.
In what order?
Judges.
I even asked her, I said, when do you want to go? Because there's 7 kids that go in the round. And I think she said
she likes to go 6th or 7th, beginning or end.
Or first. If you're 3rd or 4th, and that's just luck of the draw.
Yep.
So there could be kids that went 3rd or 4th.
And they get lost in the process.
And they get lost.
Mm-hmm.
So life's not fair.
So she is the runner-up in the state of Illinois.
Hey, Sky, so proud of you.
Yay, Skylar. So then I think we could basically end with that. I think that the reason why I thought these were important to talk about is, we want to make sure that we recognize how we're speaking and why it may stop a discussion. And we also want to notice when someone does this to us. So it's twofold. And we want to notice when we're bringing it into our parenting, our partnership, and recognizing how it does end the discussion. And sometimes we'll be like, why don't we communicate? You know, Todd mentioned this, and it's because we're saying things like this.
That's right.
So I'll end on this though. Because I like this. This is nice. And when we say to a kid, you're too young to understand, something that we could say instead is, this is kind of complicated, but I'll do my best to explain. What questions do you have? And if we say to a kid, you'll understand when you're older, something we could say differently is, you're asking a really good question. I'll do my best to answer right now. I mean,
What I like about your blog is you're telling me what to say,
Yeah.
so I don't have to think.
yeah. And
I have to memorize.
you can do your versions of it. Like, you don't have to do exactly what I said, but the point I'm trying to make is keep it, you know, it's all the worries, all the words we love: curiosity, you know, compassion, openness. That's, you know, we've been saying these things for decades.
That's right. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to encourage anybody out there that wants to join Team Zen, please do so. The link is below. I want to thank Jeremy Kraft. He's a bald-headed beauty. He does painting and remodeling throughout the Chicagoland area. 630-956-1800 is his phone number. And then maybe we'll see you at Zibby's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Going to California with an ache in my heart.